Orlando, thank you so much for joining us here at SuperReturn. It's great to have you here in Berlin.
Thanks so much, Emma, for having me.
It's been an incredibly challenging time for everybody in this industry, but what do you think are the key things that the pandemic and COVID has highlighted to the industry and to the world?
Now, that's a big question. For the industry itself, it's highlighted how great this industry is. The industry functioned very well remotely. As a matter of fact, most groups were able to deploy capital quicker than they did in a physical world. Their employees and their people were not traveling all the time. Company management wasn't traveling all the time. So your counterparty or your relationships were always available at all times. And those existing relationships that our industry has built for a long time were extremely valuable in a time when you couldn't see people face to face. I don't think we're going to go back to how the world was before exactly. And by the way, that's a very good thing. Now, the other thing the pandemic highlighted is how digital solutions, software and digital assets are the future and how they can solve problems of not only business, but our society. The second quarter after the pandemic was active, which was Q2 of 2020, you saw the use of software go way up and of digital assets go way up. And we feel that now there's another inflection point of another growth curve coming in the industry.
You've talked about what that digital revolution could and should do. What responsibility did this industry now have and to get behind that and get behind the revolution?
I appreciate that, and that's what I spoke about in my keynote, is the industry has a responsibility to understand it, to embrace it, and to unleash the power of its solutions. Not only as fiduciaries looking to maximize risk-adjusted returns, right? That's why people are here mainly, but as a matter of social responsibility, because these assets and solutions hold the key to solving society's biggest problems. And one of the ones I spoke about, you can take pick any big problem. The one that I chose to give an example of is income inequality and how it can completely change the world of education in a way that we can start addressing some of those inequities.
Why do you see this industry in particular as having the power to do that? Presumably, they have the access, they have very immediate access to the companies that are sort of creating and coming up with these innovations, don't they?
If this industry doesn't do it, who would? That's what is great about the private equity industry. It's the most forward-looking asset class. It's the longer-term asset class. It's the most strategically thoughtful asset class. And more than any other industry, it's a change agent. It's an industry of change. If you talk to any limited partner, they'll say, I'm backing that group because they will change that company. They will improve that company. They will do things differently that the quote unquote steady state credit markets or public markets or any form of investing just doesn't do.
And as a result of that, they were able to cope with the pandemic very well.
No question. In particular, for Thoma Bravo, we were in a really good position in the pandemic because the way we are organized is around a culture of trust, where we trust all of our colleagues and vice versa. We're organized on a culture of collaboration. So when we went to a completely remote environment, every colleague knew what their responsibility was to everybody else, and they knew exactly what their job was, and we didn't lose a beat.
One area that I know that you're absolutely passionate about is what role tech has to play in all of this digitization. And one thing you frown at is when sort of software is described or tech is described as a sector in itself, because it's something you see as pervasive throughout, isn't it? It
really is not an industry. And I'm really glad that the limited partner community is starting to get there. A year ago, you would hear, I have a lot of quote unquote exposure to software. It doesn't make any sense to even measure how much software you have in your portfolio. It's like saying I have a lot of exposure to a good business trend or a good business model. Software is not an industry that sits on the side of many industries. Software is the business of every industry, right? And one of the examples I gave is an education software company has nothing to do with a real estate software company, except for the fact that they're both software. Now, what's even more powerful is that these solutions are doing what humans cannot do, what the physical world cannot do. And that's one of the reasons why they hold the key to solving some big problems. what is standing in the way of more investment in the category, in the business model, as I call it, and of solving society's problems through it is how open-minded can we be? How much are we willing to change things and think completely differently about the digital world than the physical world?
And what are you seeing in terms of a response to that? Do you think this industry are more nimble and able to pivot than others?
Absolutely no question. This industry has the ultimate trust in the way it invests. Think about it, and maybe the industry is so developed now, although it's still in its infancy, but the fact that groups get blind equity checks for 10 years, 12 years, that gives you so much room to create, so much room to think differently. It's the ultimate form of investing by trusting somebody.
If somebody watching you here, giving your presentation at the conference, takes one message away, what would you say, or you would hope that message would be?
The absolute message is embrace the digital world, not only as a fiduciary, but as a citizen and a leader in the most forward-looking asset class in order to solve society's biggest problems. And always think about, as a leader in this industry, which most people here are, think about imagining the possibilities. Think about that, imagine the possibilities. You have a responsibility in the world to be a lifelong learner and to always be reinventing yourself. You owe that to prior generations, just like our ancestors gave us something. We have a responsibility to do that. And now we're living in a world where the digital revolution is well here. It has been here in the SaaS and cloud computing world really since 2007. We're about to enter Web 3.0, and we're just using very, very little of the power that is already available and of the solutions that are available. So it's up to these leaders and to society in general to once again think differently.
And how nice is it to be back in a real life environment with your colleagues to be able to have those conversations and share those insights?
It is awesome because I've gotten to see so many old friends that have supported us since the beginning. I saw somebody that I did my first software deal with 22 years ago, and it was just like yesterday. We're also meeting some new friends and establishing those relationships and getting our message across is so much more valuable in person. Now we can go back to doing some Zoom calls and continuing to repeat that message and seeing what the feedback is.
Orlando, it's been fantastic to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us here at SuperReturn.
Thanks so much for having me.